sharing best practices and also resources as well, like apps. You even share the type of apps that we've been using in our writing as well, like word counters and the likes, in terms of how they've been helpful in our writing and so forth. So, but for me, even the grammar session was amazing because there's so many things that you take for granted that are available in
Sure.
writing.
With the next steps of how to keep each other accountable, I think you're going to hear an amazing initiative from Barine after this, like a 21-day kind of a challenge where he helps you to keep, yeah. So you're going to hear something amazing from the next speaker with that.
I hope you are still well. Thank you very much for keeping with us. We are going for the last speaker now. Before we go there, there are some brochures that we gave you that are small. There is a name that says webinar. I want to invite you tomorrow evening at 6 to 8. There is a webinar, is Christianity a white man religion, run by us. We are running this webinar to educate and also to market the brand and to get things running very well. So tomorrow we have this webinar with Vince Bantu from the United States of America. He will be dealing with is Christianity.
Welcome back, everyone. This is session 4 of book writing from concept to publishing. And it really feels like we've run quite a marathon today with a great deal of input. And now the finish line is in sight. We've worked through researching, planning, writing, and editing. And now we need to know what to do with this manuscript. How do we share with the world or with our community? And for me, I think this has always been the most difficult and often discouraging part of all, because I think I was stuck in that kind of narrow and naive way of thinking about this, which was that I would find a publisher who would sweep up my manuscript and, design a great cover for it, publish it, get it onto all the platforms, Amazon, multiple bookstores, and, all I had to do was sit back and enjoy the accolades. And it wasn't like that at all. So, but if there's anybody who can, I believe, give us a balanced view on this, it is our next speaker, Kirimi Barine. Is another fellow MAI-Africa trustee. And I suspect he's going to burst our naive bubbles a little, but also show us that the reality of publishing in the modern world is far more exciting and accessible than it ever has been. Barine has been involved directly with publishing in different capacities, including writing, training others to write, and consulting on publishing-related matters. In addition, he has led and grown a publishing business that was on the verge of closure when he first became involved in it. He is the founding director of Publishing Institute of Africa and former publisher and chief executive officer at Evangel Publishing House, and gets a great deal of satisfaction from seeing new stories told and new books written by those who otherwise would not have told their story without some support. He graduated with a PhD in business administration from the University of Central Nicaragua and a doctorate in business administration from Infancy University in Switzerland. His research was in the area of governance. He also holds a master's in business administration, the Bachelor of Education from Kenyatta and Egerton Universities, respectively. He is the author and co-author of several books, among them Leading Strategic Change, Transformational Corporate Leadership, the Kenya National Anthem, Our Prayer, and Effective Corporate Governance, among many others, and contributing writer to various magazines around the world. Barine enjoys continuous learning, and hence has taught leadership and governance at St. Paul's University and Pan Africa Christian University. He has also supervised students doing their research projects in the graduate programs, and in addition, he consults for many public and private sector organizations and enjoys training and facilitating workshops and seminars around the globe. So welcome, Barine. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, John, and all the team that is involved with organizing this great event. It's a great blessing for me to be part of this. For a moment, when I listened to you, John, introduce me, I was not too sure that was the introduction. Well, I'm very glad to have been part of this process, especially I've been listening in to what Lawrence had to say to you and even what Roger had to say. And kind of that makes my work much easier because they've dealt with the hardest part. And the hardest part is getting your magazine, and I mean, not your magazine, but getting your content ready for publishing. But if you're in with you, because I don't have a handout like they did, but I do have a PowerPoint presentation. And so if you allow me, I will do that, and hopefully you will get to see my screen. Hope you can be able to see what's on my screen. Joanne, maybe you can just confirm that. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me know that. So I'm just here to talk about understanding the publishing process, but let me give you a context in how all this comes together. I know that Joanna has introduced me, but I just want to grab a few things that will possibly give you an insight. One is the fact that I proud myself to be a child of God, and I keep on saying that all that I do, just like Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 15:10, and he said, I'm who I am by the grace of God. And so I count myself nothing without the relationship that I have with God. It's the one that has enabled me to do all that I've been able to do, whether it's my writing, my publishing, my consulting, my training. That's a very important piece of my life. So I know that I'm a child of God. I do everything I can to live that, and I try as much as possible to share to everyone to know that I pride myself as a child of God. I'm also proud to have a family that's very supportive of my writing and publishing endeavors. Married to one wife, and we are blessed with 2 teenage children. And that, they are the ones that encourage me to do a lot of what I have done. They are my cheerleaders, and they encourage me in the things that I do. Well, I've been a publisher for the last two decades, and that means working with authors, with people who have ideas. Sometimes people come to me and all they have is just an idea. And some of them know that God wants them to write a book, but they don't even have an idea, and so we have to explore with them what that means. And I've really enjoyed that space for the last couple of years that I've been doing that. But the bigger part of my publishing is the fact that I am an author, and I enjoyed listening to Roger talk about that writers need editors, and it's interesting for me to be in that space where I'm an author, and so I have to work with editors to edit other people's books, but even more so I have to subject my own writing to editors' feedback and sometimes critiquing what I've written. And so I have interesting experiences on that experience. And at the same time, being a publisher and being able to direct people and help them after they have the ideas, what next and how do they manage to get to do those things that they do. And part of this journey that I've been able to connect with many organizations that have formed part of my experiences in publishing. Sadly, Joanne has talked about my role as founding director of the Publishing Institute of Africa. And ideally, Publishing Institute of Africa was formed so that to encourage quality publishing in Africa. And that has been our mantra, to say that we want the best of publishing to be done in Africa by Africans and for Africans. And we are proud of the work that we are doing in that space. I'm also involved with Media Associates International, and especially in Africa, being one of the trustees. but also being a trainer and involved in providing training for people who are interested in writing and publishing, and especially in places where resources are limited, and very proud to be involved in that. I'm also involved with the United Bible Societies, which is a global fellowship of Bible societies in 150 nations, providing scriptures to over 240 regions around the world. And the most interesting experience I've had is to mobilize the last 3-4 years. I've had the privilege of mobilizing 25 African Bible societies and bringing in over 280 women writers to develop what has been produced as Africa Women Devotional Bible. And this is just a Bible that's been published by African Bible societies, addressing issues that women in Africa face and addressed from an African context, and all written by women and women from the African continent. Very proud of that. Just an initiative to show you that so many things are possible when people work together. And also I've been involved with an initiative called the Africa Leadership Study, which is a group of people that came together, facilitated by Tyndale's Foundation, to find out about leadership, Christian leadership in Africa. And there is a lot of research that has been done. You can find a lot of resources that are available all for free at www.africaleadershipstudy.org. And you can go in there, join, and be part of that group and see what is happening in that space, especially for those who have a lot of interest on leadership in Africa. Without spending much, and I'll possibly refer to some of those experiences in my presentation and also tell you how you can be involved. I have a scripture that really inspires me, and that is Psalm 96 and verse 3-4. And the scripture, when you read the New Living Translation, says, "Publish his glorious deeds among the nations. Tell everyone about the amazing things he does. Great is the Lord, he is most worthy of praise, and he is to be feared above all gods." That really is my very, the scripture that really kind of challenges me to do what I do. Every day, the work I do in terms of publishing. You possibly, if you read your version, most of the other versions talk about declare. But you can clearly see that it's talk about publishing what God has done among the nations. And that means writing and telling people and facilitating people who are into writing like yourselves to communicate, to talk about the things that God has done in their lives. And I remember something that Roger said earlier on, and participating online, and you are wondering, what can I write? Your story is unique. You can tell about the glorious deeds that God has done in your life, and you can tell that not just to your family, to your church family, but to your nation and way beyond. And so that encourages me. But then the second part that I've highlighted, it says, tell everyone. So that means we write, yes, we write thinking locally, thinking about our audience, and I'll talk a lot more about why for us as publishers, you have to then refer to writers and ask them who their audience is. It says tell everyone. And so whatever I write today, as much as I may have a narrow audience that is possibly stationed in a country like Kenya where I live, I also believe that I'm positioned to write for everyone. And so I communicate. I try and make sure that my books are available to everyone around the world, because the scripture tells me to tell everyone about the amazing things he does. And I know that if each one of you was to start telling about the amazing things that God has done in your life, you possibly will not only have one book, but 2 or 3 or 5 or many others. And so that is my inspiration, and that is what drives me. I want to take you to a little bit of an exercise because I also want to engage you. So I know that not everybody might be in a position to do this, but if you're in a position to do this, it will help me understand who is in my audience. And all that this really requires is for you to get whether it's into your phone or to your computer, to our website, www.menti.com. We can take about 2 or 3 minutes to just do this little quick exercise. If you go to that page, it will require you to enter a code or to use a code. And all I need you to do is use that code that is right there, and just be able to and just be able to possibly then see some questions. There are only 3 questions that I have there, and I just want to share those with you, and I just want to know what your experience. Have you been involved in writing before? And if you have been involved in writing, have you been published? And if you have been published, how did you publish your book? So those are the 3 questions that I have, and if you can just quickly do that, that would be very helpful. And you can use the chat. I possibly will be able, for those who are online, to know whether you can be able to do this pretty quickly. So can we do that for 3 minutes? 3 minutes. There are 3 questions. www.menti.com, and then use the question. Use the code, and that code is 17411505. So if you are able to do that, yes.
Just checking here whether everyone is winning with the website. I'm there. I'm answering the questions.
Yes, I can see so far I have 14 people who have responded.
Okay. Maybe just give us another minute or so.
All right, no problem. That's fine. Let's do that.
Oh. Yes, that's why I am as well. Yes, so it says please wait for the presenter to show you the next slide. That's what everybody's seeing at the moment on
Okay.
their screen.
Right, that's fine. I have 18 people. I was just waiting for as many people to respond. So far I have 20 who have responded. So I have 7 who said they have written a book, 6 have not, and 8 are in the process. Okay. I'll go to the next question. If you have written a book, how did you get it published? Okay. So did you do it with a publisher? Were you self-published, or you're not yet published?
I suppose if you've not written a book, do you not answer?
Well, you're not yet published, because if you haven't written, you still are in the category of those who are not yet published.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, and I can see from the chat I missed out for those who have both options. Someone says there is need for 4th option, which is both. Those who are self-published and they have done so with a publisher as well. I'll remember that next time, Samuel. Thank you so much. Okay, so I can see we have quite a good number of people. 17 have not been published, 3 are self-published, and 4 of them have done that with the publisher. Okay, let me just share the last question. And the last question is, you just type in anything. What was your biggest challenge in the publishing process? So just type in whatever it is that was your biggest challenge. Just waiting to see some answers coming in there.
You are being asked to open for voting.
Oh, okay. Let me see why it's all right. Okay. Okay, now it's open, I believe. Sorry about that. So what was your biggest challenge in the publishing process? Okay, I can see agent. Type in anything, whatever it is that might have been, and even for those who have not published, maybe I should have just said that you could possibly see, as you think about publishing, where do you think is the biggest challenge? I can see quite a number of responses that are coming in. Some are saying agent, formatting of the book, money, timing, language. Okay. Face not yet there. Disbelief by the publisher, finance, illustration, not knowing publishers, not process not known. One was rejected by traditional publisher. Okay, great. Those are pretty good insights right there, and I will hold them for a moment, and then I'll share with you later on some of those results. So I'll keep that open even as I move forward. So let me just move on to with the presentation, and then we can get back to that and later on with some question and answers. I think it's very important that we fully understand when we talk about publishing, what exactly are we talking about? And as you possibly can see from my slide, that the word publishing really is derived from a Latin word. And that word means to make public, to reveal, to divulge, to announce, to declare. All those are words that really describe what publishers do. And as you can possibly follow with from my presentation, when you talk about publishing a book, basically, we are talking about transforming what you've been writing privately. And I know that Roger talked about editing and that whole process. But that transformation, quite a number of us believe so much in what we write. And Lawrence referred to this earlier on when he says some people write, and I've had this experience where when in one of my previous experiences in a publishing house, someone brought a manuscript to me and said, look, this book has been inspired to me by the Holy Spirit. So you cannot change a comma, you cannot add anything, you might just get it done as is. And I remember telling them that, look, then you don't need a publisher, because my work is to transform your manuscript, is to help you communicate better what you have said. I must add to a disclaimer to this, that if you're also not very careful with editors, they can get you to write their book, what they have in mind about the subject. So it's not about them helping you change your book and your story and writing their story, but it's about them helping you tell your story better. And that's what publishing is all about. And so whatever you have written, a publisher helps you to transform it, and we'll talk about that process of transformation. What does it entail? And they also help you make it available and readable, because different audiences, different readers that you have will require, for example, different formats of your book when it is published. And so that is the work of a publisher. It's to take your manuscript, what you have written, and then be able to help you move it from the raw state that it is in, and be able to make it better. And then once it's better, then package it in a way that it is readable and available and accessible to the audience that you have been writing for. So it's very, very important that you realize that publishers have a job to do. And whether you are engaging yourself as a self-publisher, or whether you're engaging a publisher, you need to know what is the role of a publisher. Quite often, many people don't understand what publishers are there to do, and I've had experiences where people come in and think publishers are printers, and sometimes I have to explain to people that there's a big difference between a publisher and a printer. In my simplest description of a printer, they just add ink to paper, so that is possibly the easiest part of the process. But publishers really take what's been written and, with a certain audience in mind, help to package that. From editing, that means looking at the content, to how it is packaged, that means the formatting of it, the design of the cover, and all those other processes that I will mention in the next few slides that I have. When I look at history, or when I look at tradition, the role of the publisher is significantly changing. When I got into publishing 20 years plus ago, 2 decades, more than 2 decades ago, it was quite interesting that the publishers really served as a bridge. And I have an illustration that I use just to indicate how publishing is changing. That in those days, publishers were really the bridge between the content that you had and the audience that you had in mind. In this sense, authors or writers had very limited access to audiences. Why? Because the publishers controlled the distribution process through the distributors. And so if you had your own book, unless you had your own audience, it was very difficult. And in those days, issues of self-publishing were not as rampant or as available as they are today. And so the authors or the writers would create the content, they would generate their structure, which was talked about by Lawrence, they would do their research, they would do all their writing. And then they would hand it to a publisher, and the people presented a book, and the publishers didn't think it was publishable. And there are enough stories of books that were self-published, and they were able to become New York best time sellers, yet they had been presented to publishers who didn't believe that they had any. Publishers then came in, and all they did was just to work on the content packaging. So they worked on the editorial, making sure that the book communicates. They did all the design and the layout, and they did production. And then, because they had access to the audience through different avenues, what they did is that then they were able to distribute the content to the audience. And so they did the marketing, the distribution, the promotion. They also engaged with the authors. And you realize previously, most publishers had a way possibly of engaging with authors, and they gave them feedback in terms of what they read in their book and how it had been of great blessing or help to them. And if there was any licensing or translation, then that was significantly done or handled by the publisher. Fast track to the impact of digital into the world of publishing, because technology has changed publishing. As a matter of fact, the evolving of what we are calling the e-books and all these other platforms that we use for publishing have all been advanced simply because they have been it's because of the digital transformation. And so what has happened, and this is my own personal view, it can be challenged of course, is that model that previously worked before has collapsed. It's still there, and you'll see that when I talk about the different models of publishing. We still have that traditional publishing, but it has been scaled down because technology has come in and has allowed the authors or the writers to be able to connect with the audience. As you can see, whereas previously the audience was on one end, extreme end, and the authors were on the extreme end, and the publisher was in the middle, right now that model has been broken, and the readers or the audience are actually at the center of publishing. And what is even more challenging for many publishers now is the fact that, yes, the publishers have access to the audiences, but at the same time, the writers of the content have access to the same audience. What that means for me as a publisher is I am no longer the bridge, but I need to be as a value add to both the audience, to the readers. I need to be a value add to the authors, so that each one of them see and appreciate the value of the work that I do on any project that I work with them. And so you can talk about the publisher providing publishing services, and whether those services are editorial, whether those services are in the area of design, whether those are in the area of engagement, whether it's in the area of marketing, promotion, all accessing the great networks that publishers have established over the years. Those are all the benefits. But in terms of who is at the center, the publisher, in my view, is no longer at the center of publishing initiatives. The audiences, the people that we are targeting with the message that we are publishing are the center, and the people and have access to the same readers. So if that is the case, then what are some of the key elements or aspects that are very important? I want to share with you what I consider to be 3 pillars of publishing. As we talk about publishing, as you look forward to publish already, as you look forward to publishing your next book, there are 3 pillars that I think are very important in my own view again. One is that you need to think about who the audience is. Remember, in my previous slide, I have clearly said that at the center of all writing and will determine the content, it will determine how you engage with them if you know who you're writing for. I've asked quite a number of others who have worked before and who I'm currently worked with, and when they come to me and I ask them, who are you writing for? Sometimes people give very general statements. I'm writing for Christians. Who are Christians? Christians, when you look at the definition of who Christians are, it cuts across. And so you must be able to narrow down that book idea that you have. Who do you think is going to be interested in it? Sometimes some great books have been rejected by publishers because writers did not, first of all, give thought to the whole question of who is it that you're writing for. And then if you talk about what are they looking for, what are subjects of interest to them, what issues are they dealing with, are they struggling with that they want addressed? Yes, I am a Christian, but what are the issues that I'm struggling with in my life? And that's you narrow down to the issues that your target audience is looking for. Then you write a book, and it might be a great book, the content might be great, but you may be surprised that there is no one who is interested in the book because you didn't narrow it down to address a certain problem. I buy books because they help me deal with a certain issue. When I was listening to Lawrence and he was talking about some of the books that have been making charts in the publishing world today, it is the how-to books, the self-help category of books. Why are people running to self-help books? And the whole issue is because people are looking for solutions to issues and problems that they are dealing with. And so the best thing that you can do is be able to help people solve problems, deal with issues. And certainly if you are writing from a Christian perspective, then you're writing from the biblical point of view. I remember my first book in the year 2006 when I wrote a book, Rediscovering Leadership. And someone asked, there are so many books that have been written on leadership. Why are you writing this particular book? And I said, having analyzed the environment that I'm in, from the church, from the Christian community, and looking at how we practice leadership, I clearly saw a big disconnect between how we practice leadership and how Jesus himself not only practiced, but how he taught leadership. And so I went back into the scriptures, even though I'm not a theologian myself, but I went to the scriptures to discover what did Jesus teach about leadership, and what exactly can we learn from him, and how have our models of leadership today deviated from Jesus' teaching on leadership. And so asking yourself that simple question of what are the audiences looking for? Of course, Lawrence talked about research, and I don't want to go into that. And I wish we had more time for me to share with you some of the tools that you can use. But I'll just quickly give you a very simple tool that I use and that you can use. And it's available for free to a great extent, but there's a paid version. And that tool is called www.answerthepublic.com. When you go to that website, you can ask any question. If I want to write a book on marriage and family, for example, I can type that marriage and family, and I can narrow down that the topic search into what people are asking in Johannesburg, Christians are asking in Johannesburg about that subject, and it will give me a report. And those questions alone can give you even an outline. They can give you the basis of an outline of a book, and you can find any question. I've searched any question that I've been able to find. So, who is your audience and what are they looking for? You've got to know that. Then you have to ask yourself, what is the content? What are you writing? What are you writing about? And that again, Lawrence covered about the content. Developing an outline that clearly shows that you are answering the questions and the issues that all these people who you are targeting are answering. One of the biggest challenges I have as a publisher, and I've experienced this over and over again, is when I have great titles of books that overpromise, but when I get the book, it underdelivers. I mean, I'm just overwhelmed by those kind of books because you give such a great promise. I look at your book and I think I'm going to get great content here, and then I start reading the book and I'm disappointed. Disappointed because the content does not match the expectations that you created. So that whole thinking of your content, making sure that it addresses the needs and making it relevant. And there are so many examples, practical examples that both Lawrence and Roger gave that clearly shows that you write for the people, you use illustrations that they can connect with and that they are able to understand. And then the third and a very important element of publishing, in my view, is that of engagement. How will you connect with the audience? Once you know who your audience are, you will also get to know where they reside and what platforms they use. Sometimes you try to get to your audience through Facebook and maybe they are not on Facebook. So getting to know where your audience is so that you also know how will you engage with them. How will you know the impact of your book in their lives? And this is one question that sometimes publishers have used to turn away books that have been written and are looking for a publisher, because you have this idea of a great content that you want to write about. You possibly know who the audience is, but you don't even know how you can connect with them. Publishers basically want to publish books that have an audience because they don't want to publish books that will just rest on their shelves. And so having clear idea of how to engage, what platforms your audience is likely to be in, that helps significantly. The reason why you've seen the growth of self-publishing in the last couple of years is because quite a number of writers and authors are able to connect with their audiences. For example, for those of you who have pastors, you have your first line of audience right there in your church. The people who come to your church must be connected to you in one way or another. They believe in what you're doing, and that becomes the first line. But unless you are running such a mega church, you know very well that if you're just writing for that audience that is next to you, that will certainly be exhausted within a very short time. So how do you then grow the audience? How do you find other people who share that common need on the subject that you're writing about? Engagement is very important. And so in my view, again, I am of the opinion that quite often we do have books that have been written, great books that would change a lot of lives, but because we didn't think through clearly who the audience is, we possibly didn't work on the content. And also thinking of a lot of opportunities that would possibly expand their reach. When I talk about content, Certainly, this is where editorial comes in, and I remember very well Lawrence talked about developmental editing. And this is basically where you, before you even get your book written and fully ready for publishing, you get someone who will help you think through the big picture. This is what I want to write about. What are some of the issues that you need to address, and make that book as impactful as it is possible. So assuming then that you have your manuscript ready, for those who are in the process of writing, once your manuscript is ready, what are the next steps that are there in publishing? What are the steps in the publishing process? I strongly categories. One is what we talk about, what I call the pre-publication. This is where you have what I call ideation. You are doing your brainstorming. You are talking to others who have written on your subject. You are looking at, you're researching and going online into public spaces, asking people questions. If I'm writing a book on this, what are some of the issues that you want to be able to get answered? Social media is a great place also to get ideas, because you can ask questions if you are active on social media, and people can give you responses. And so in terms of research, there are a lot of places that you can find enough tools. But then you have written your book or in the process of writing. So I call this first phase the book, are getting your idea around it and making sure that you have the best manuscript that you can, that is ready to go to the publisher. You clearly heard from Roger, and he mentioned that however great a writer you are, don't try and take your first draft to a publisher, because that will be only introducing pain to the process. You're now independent of you, who's going to look at your ideas, who's going to give you feedback and tell you, you can improve on this, you can add this, or possibly you need to subtract this because it's not necessary. Then there's a second step of the process, which I refer to as the bookmaking process. And this is basically where, sorry about that, and this is where you are thinking about the extra slide. Editorial basically is it's taking your manuscript and making sure that you improve on it so that the message communicates to your audience the way you intended. Removing all the irrelevancies, and Roger ably talked about all that whole process. It also involves design and layout. I know that enough people are, there's a saying that do not judge a book by its cover. But I always add a rider to that statement that a good cover sells quite a number of them as well. So you cannot ignore that. The element of design and presentation, the layout, which is all about your presentation. How do you present your good content? If I'm writing for children, my presentation will be very different from when I'm writing for teenagers and young adults. And the same thing, different when I'm presenting on the academia. If you look at my academic books that have been published, they are very different from the books that I've published that are for general readership. Because it's about thinking about what the expectation on your reader is all about. And then publishing also has to do with production. Getting your book into the hands of your readers, whether in print format, whether as a print on demand, or whether as an ebook. And there's a great webinar coming up next week by MAI, and possibly you are aware about it, and that is publishing your book into different platforms. Connect to that webinar and get a more detailed perspective, especially on that element in terms of the production. Then the third element in the process that we have is what we call the post-publishing, and this is basically about book supply. We don't publish the books for ourselves. We don't write for ourselves. And in fact, one of the interesting conversations I always have with writers when they come and ask for my help is to say, you must detach yourself from the book, because you're not writing for yourself and your friends. Quite often when you give your book to your friends, and I've seen this over and over again and you give to your friends. Even personally, when I've written a book and I give my friends to review the book, most of them will tell me, this is great, it's lovely. Why? Because my friends think just like me. Quite often, I have people around me who think like myself. And maybe sometimes they don't want to offend me, so they tell me it's a great book. But having someone else different than myself review by a book will always give me insights into areas that I can improve. And so once you have written the book, because you are not writing it for yourself, then you have to ask yourself, what is it that needs to be done to make sure that this book is available to the people that I was targeting? How do they get to know about this book? So marketing comes into play. How do I distribute this book? Is it as a print book? Is it as an ebook? How do I promote it? How do I get people to know that this book is available? And what platforms do I have to engage with the people who are interested in my book? And in situations where people are interested in my book in a different language than the one that I've written, how do I get that done? So in terms of licensing and translation, this happens after the book is published, after the book is available out there, and people are able then to start making those inquiries. I'm saying this because I mentioned about this little book that I wrote a couple of years back. That book has been published now. It's available in French. It's available in Ethiopia, in Amharic, and several other languages. I did not step out writing with the intention of having the book translated, but people got interested in that book and they asked whether they could be able to translate. So those three steps are very important. What is it involved in the middle step, which is the publishing process, the editorial, the design, and layout? There are three steps that I want to just give you insights into. That when we talk about publishing, there are three steps that I believe are very, very critical. One is the editorial, and I've already mentioned about developmental editing. This is basically where you take the before you even develop your content, you have someone listen to your ideas and they interrogate them and they help you improve on the big picture of the book. That if I want to write on marriage and family, or if I want to write about finances, what is it do I want to write about finances? Is it about giving? Lawrence gave an example of giving early on. Or do I also want to address the question of people who are thinking all those are still in the same sphere of finances and finance management, being good stewards of the resources that God has entrusted. But which spectrum? So having someone help you develop your idea, but narrow it down into a specific area that people call structural editing. And this is just looking at your book and wondering, is it communicating? So that the way you structured it, and this is where the whole idea of the outline comes in. Sometimes you find that when authors bring their manuscript, when I evaluate their manuscript, I find that maybe what they have as their conclusion is actually what should have been there at the introduction. And maybe something that they had at the introduction fits very well somewhere in the middle of the book. Possibly reorganizing the book into sections. So all that is part of structural editing, and that is very, very important. There's also the whole idea of copy editing. And this is where now you go into the language use, the grammar, and how that is all used together. And then we do have line editing. And now you're getting into the finer details. Do we have full stops where they're supposed to be? And then we have the final stage, which is the proofreading. And this normally happens, especially after the design and layout. And the importance of this is to ensure that there is consistency. How are your paragraphs? How are your paragraphs started? Are they all left aligned, or are they tabbed? Those simple things that we ignore, but are very important in the consistency of the book. I remember one time one author I was working with, and they asked me, do we really have to do proofreading? I mean, all this, is it necessary? And when I gave them a checklist of what we use for proofreading, they were amazed at the number of things that can go wrong in a book after it has gone through all those editorial processes. So each of those elements are very important, and it's very critical for you who is writing to know what is involved in each and why it's important and why it's necessary. Whether you will go with a traditional publisher or you will do what we call self-publishing. It's very important that you understand that part of the process. Secondly is the design and layout, and I've mentioned about this, so I'll be brief. And this is all about formatting the text, the presentation of your content. Sometimes I've seen great content and that is not well presented and is not appealing to the people who are the target audience. It's very important, and it's great that you work with a professional who will take your content and interpret what it is that you're communicating, also understand your audience and be able to marry the two, so you have a book that is well presented to your target audience. I already talked about cover design, and I cannot overemphasize the value and the need for a great cover design, because the first point of contact with your content is your cover. If it's not appealing enough, they may not be willing to even look at the table of contents. So a cover is the first phase where people connect with your book, and so it's very important that you ensure that you have a cover that reflects the content. Sometimes I've seen covers that are extremely too busy that you cannot even tell what the main subject is, what the subtitle of the book is. All those bits and pieces, we cannot talk about them in this just 1 hour. But then the third step is the production. And this is where we then take the book that has been published, it's ready, and start availing it to the people that it was intended for. Whether it's available as a print book, as an ebook, as whatever format that it is that we are availing this book. But then, and you might have talked about it, you might even have possibly posted a couple of photos and images on your social media. But you know very well that we already are so much swamped with a lot of information on social media. What you post today about the book that you're writing, 1 week later, I can't remember who was writing which book. So it's important for you to have a clear marketing strategy. How will people get to know? How will you distribute this book? What promotion mechanisms are you putting in place? How will you keep on engaging with the people that you are writing for? And like I said, if you have an interest for someone else in a language that you don't speak and you don't write, how are you going to enable them to access? All these are very important. Again, people who are doing lots of training, and it's good that you understand how you get your book produced, and whether you're doing it yourself as a self-publisher, whether you're engaging with an existing, a traditional publisher, it's very important that you have conversations with them on these elements of your book publishing process. The next important piece of information I want to share with you is the models that are available for publishing. I can just possibly gather them into 3. You possibly can create 4 different models or 5 or other as many as you may want, but I strongly believe the 3 that I want to talk about is traditional publishing, self-publishing, and what I refer to as hybrid publishing. Now, the traditional publishing is basically where you work with a third-party publisher and you allow them the rights to release your book. So the content is yours, you own it, you've produced it, and then you allow someone else to take that content and enable you to get to the process of then the publishing and dissemination of your content. In that case, then basically the publisher manages the whole process. They take care of your editing, they take care of your design work, they take care of your marketing of the book. They are able to release it, possibly if they have many imprints, they will be able to have an imprint and they will put that on the book as their publisher. They will also pay you, and some traditional other publishers, they will pay you an advanced royalty. That's possibly a Western model, not quite common, especially in our continent. But they'll also pay you a percentage of royalty. That percentage of royalty could be anything from 10% to 15%. That is the range where we've seen most of the traditional publishers pay royalties of that kind. I know that quite often people argue that, the publishers are making all the money and they are paying very little in terms of royalties. I do have an article that I wrote a couple of years back trying to demystify what the basis of the royalty is all about. If you look at the investment that is involved in publishing a book and the risk, of course, that the publishers put in place, then you possibly might be able to understand why that model, the royalties, are few. And the only benefit, especially to many authors, is if you end up selling hundreds and or thousands of books, then that eventually. In other words, in this model, product of your book for the publisher services and their connections, especially within the industry, whether it is in distribution or the other connections that they enjoy. Of course, we can talk about copyright and the whole process of how you assign your copyright to the publisher, but that's a different story for another day and with a limitation of time. Then secondly, we have the self-publishing model. And this is basically where the author becomes the publisher themselves. And that means they own the work, they take control of the work and the publishing process. They have all the rights to the book, but they also take charge of all the risks and all the responsibilities. For who called me, they were given my phone number, and so they called me and they said, I've been told you can give me contacts of a good editor, of a good designer, of a good publisher, and all the other things that they asked. And so I remember asking them one question. I said, if you get a good publisher, what's of a good editor and a good designer? And they couldn't answer that question. And then I said that they are a bad editor. Now, what I'm trying to say with that illustration here is to say, in self-publishing, you take responsibility for books that you publish. So whether you are knowledgeable of what a good editor is all about or a good designer, basically you take responsibility for that. Quite often, many people have gone into this route and they have succeeded, and we have great examples of self-published books that have done very well. But we also have thousands of books that have done poorly because they were self-published, and the people who went that route did not take into account what it means to be a publisher and to take responsibility for the content that we publish. Then we have the third model, and the third model is what I call the hybrid publishing. And with hybrid publishing, in my view, it is in between. It's in between traditional publishing and self-publishing. And this is where you basically pay for services that will be rendered by a publisher, and then they help you, they take responsibility of making sure that your book is basically their connections, but at the same time you do not allow them, you don't just release all the rights to them. That means you still enjoy the control of quite a number of rights in terms of your book and distribution. And this model has been used, it's been used with different terms. Some people call it author-assisted publishing, others refer to it as independent publishing, or partner publishing, or co-publishing, or entrepreneurial publishing. Whatever the name they use, the whole idea is you have the services of a publisher who will be able to take care of the responsibility of guiding you through the process. You pay for certain services, and together you have a joint effort of both promoting and distributing the books, taking advantage of their networks and their expertise, but at the same time taking advantage of the processes that they can guarantee and they can help you. I consider hybrid publishing as one of the new models, and over the years, especially for the works that we have done in Publishers Institute, we have adopted that model, and we've seen it grow and help many people produce very quality books that eventually have possibly amazed us and amazed them as well. And so those are some of the elements that I can possibly talk about. If time would have allowed, there would have been much more, but I'm conscious that we are limited of time. So before we get into a few question and answers, I know that when Bafana was talking about myself, he mentioned that I would introduce to you of something that we did and we want to possibly offer to those who are part of this webinar. when COVID began, and I was stuck with what to do and how to help writers get writing, I realized I was not traveling, and so I had quite a lot of some time available. And I thought about many people who had asked me how to get published. And I didn't have the time to engage with each one of them one on one. And so COVID came, and I said, oh, I have some time around. What can I do? And inspired by a friend of mine who does social media training, I was able to do what we call a 21-day writing challenge. And this is basically where I invited people to sign in and say, I'm committing myself for 21 days, continuous days. In those 21 days, I was going to provide them with 21 insights. I was also going to provide them with 21 tasks. And the promise that I gave is that they were going to get what I called accelerated results. We did this challenge last year, and we had 40 or 42 people who actually signed up for that challenge. We didn't broadcast it a lot, and we didn't market it a lot because I was afraid that I may have a number that I possibly would not be able to handle. But through our networks, we got 42 people who got into this exercise. It's amazing that we had quite a number of people who are spread across, and even some right from South Africa, where most of you are seated watching and listening to us. And I want to tell you today that out of that training, we have 3 books that have been since published as a result of that. And we have about 5 or so others who are in the process, almost at the tail end. And this is because we were able to demystify what writing and publishing is. And this was done in 21 days. So when the organizers of this webinar asked me, I said I had not exactly thought through in terms of organizing a second, but in their honor, I want to be able to organize this within the next month or so. And so if you are interested in being part of this, just send me an email. You can see the email that is there on the screen, barine@me.com, and I will get you details of how you can register, and also information of when this can start. And I believe that this will help both those who have been published and those who are in the process of writing their book. You will learn a lot in terms of what are some of the pitfalls and the things that you need to avoid to do. So if you're interested, just get me an email and I'll be able to respond to that. And then another invitation that I want to open up to you as part of MAI-Africa, and possibly some of you are on the page. MAI Facebook. I want to extend. We are working on a devotional, and the devotional is called Experiencing God Through Pain. And we're inviting those of you who might be interested. It's a very short devotional, just about between 400 and 600 words, looking at biblical examples of people who went through pain and the lessons that we can learn from them. And so if you want a quick avenue to exercising your writing that you've been learning to do and being published, I also invite you to consider being part of this. You can write to me and say that you're interested, or even write to Joanne, and we'll share with you the guidelines. It's a 2-page guideline that you can use to write your devotional and submit it. And once these are done, we'll be able to have them edited and compiled, and that devotional will be available both as print but as an ebook available on Africa website. So those are 2 invitations that I want to extend to you. And thank you again for giving me audience.
Thank you.
And listening to what I have to say. I am more than happy to be able to share on my email if you have other questions at a later date. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barine. Can you give him a hand? Can you just get your page to your email again, if you don't mind? Just going to email.
Sure, I can do that.
Your email. I like that you can do, right? There's something that you can do for you to be able to get something after 21 days. So write to him, and I'm sure he will be able to explain some of the things and as to how they work, the practical side of it. All right. Any just questions, burning questions that you have for Mr. Barine? Or did he, can you still hear us? Can you hear us, Barine?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, yes.
Maybe just a question from me. How important is a platform before you write? Maybe just answering just pithy and to the point, recognizing time as well. You spoke about that some people have
You talk
a
about
large platform.
you talk about other platform.
Like a platform, like how else can I say it? Like, you know, we've got pastors, like you talked about mega church pastors who have a huge platform where when they write a book, they can be able to sell them. I'm saying how important is a person having a platform that they can be able to sell their books to?
I keep on saying this. I don't necessarily think that you really need to have a platform as you start writing. I strongly don't think that that is necessary as you start writing. But a good platform enables you to do several things. One is that you are able to create anticipation and expectation of of the audience. Some of the most successful books were not successful because the authors had an audience before. But they started talking about what they want to write on way ahead of time. And so I strongly believe that a platform is helpful. It should not be the only determining factor, because I have examples of books that we published or people that didn't have an audience. They didn't have a platform, but we helped them but if you're able to think of one, it becomes one extra reason why a publisher will consider your book, because they'll already see that you are engaging with the people that you intend to reach out to. So I would say it's important, not overly important, but it helps.
Thank you. You spoke also about editors. Where do we find editors? And what is the criteria for an editor? I'm thinking now, you just finished writing and you want somebody to check the book, and it has been emphasized that editors are important. Where are these editors? Where can they be found, and what criteria should we use? I'm sure we can't use our grandmothers or anyone to be an editor. So where do we find these editors?
That's a very good question, and also a hard question to answer. And the reason why I say it's hard, because I've had people who come to me asking for publishing services, and then when I tell them what needs to be done and I include editing, then someone says, "Oh, you know, my English teacher is a very good editor, and they have promised me that they are going to edit my book for free." Or I have this person in my church who is an English teacher, or something like that. And then I have to help them really understand what editing involves and what that process is all about. And most often then people are able to understand the difference between editing and proofreading. That anybody with a basic understanding of any language, whether it's English, whether it's Afrikaans or whatever, they can be able to provide proofreading because they can see where you've made errors. But editing is just more than checking in and seeing a missed comma, full stop, and question mark or something like that. And so the whole question of how do you find book editors, I think there are 2 or 3 suggestions I can give. One, there are many online platforms, but I cannot guarantee those online platforms that you get quality and value. So as much as you can go online and search for editors in Johannesburg or Cape Town or wherever and find a whole list of them, I personally use referral as a basis. You know, if you find a good book written by a South African that you possibly know somebody that you know and you think this is great editing, that's a good beginning point where you say, can you write to this person, ask them who edited their book? That is possibly one beginning point where you can find good editors. Secondly, is also asking publishers and people who have been published. They possibly will give you a reference of a name. So those are the two or three avenues that I think you can find good editors. But I must admit that we are in shortage of good editors within our continent, and that is one area that I know there are many attempts, even within MAI, to develop training that will ensure that we have good editors. Again, you must think about editors within the subject area that you're writing. If I am a theologian today and I'm writing a theological book, then I need to be sure that the person who is going to edit my book has an understanding of the subject. Otherwise, there will be a lot of push and pull between yourself and your editor, simply because they possibly don't understand your subject matter well. So when you talk about editing, there are so many things, but there are checklists in terms of what you can do, and I possibly can pull out one and send it over to you or to Joanne, that can be shared with the participants at a later date, of simple questions that you can use to ask a potential editor and that will be able to will enable you determine whether this is a good editor or not a good editor at all.
Thank you. Please send those questions to MAI so that we can have them. Yeah, we are about to close. Any burning questions before we close? I just have a vote of thanks. I believe Africa has a comment that he wants to share. Sorry?
What do you want to comment? That's not a question for him. It's not a comment for him. It's an overall comment.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Barine. Thank you so much for just giving us your time and your insight.
I think there's a question on the platform that I saw from Joy, who asked, is there a way to know how to find your audience?
Okay. Is there a way to know?
It's a good question there. If you can just
find
give me a
your
minute,
audience?
I can.
You can go ahead.
All right. I think when you talk about how to find your audience, who are you writing for? Because by the time you get yourself to write, by the time you say, I have an insight that I want to convert into a book, then one of the questions that you should ask yourself is, who would be interested in this writing that I'm going to write about? And I've seen, like I said earlier on, and I've done this myself before, where I even ask questions to my friends, to people that I connect with, whether physically or social media, and I ask them simple questions. If you found a book on this subject, would you be interested in reading about it? And it's amazing how I get insights into that, and that enables me to develop content that would be of interest to people who are likely to be interested in what I am doing. So I strongly believe that goes back to the whole question of research, finding out about who your audience is, what they're interested in, and then knowing where they are found so that you start connecting with them. And that is one way that you can be able to find your audience. It's just by asking questions. Questions will always enable you to find people who have an interest in what you're writing about. If you allow me just one quick minute, I can just give you an insight of something that is in the works that will make people who are looking for their audiences be much easier in the coming years, if I may use that word, because it may not just happen overnight. We are creating a platform, and when I say we, I'm part of this group that I talked about, the Africa Leadership Study. We are creating a platform that we are hoping to connect Christian leaders across the continent of Africa. And if you go to Facebook, you'll find that there already. We have something called African Christian Leaders. And for those who are on Zoom, I've just shared the link right there. And I would encourage, our hope and our anticipation is that we will be able to connect Christians across the continent and then be able to share some of these questions of, if I'm writing a book about money, who would be interested in that kind of a book? Or if I've written Africa is, how can we make sure that these books are read in Nigeria and in Ghana, where Lawrence is, and in Kenya, where I'm based? So it's about creating platforms that will enable us to connect with our audiences, but also connect with the message that we have. I must confess that in my 2 decades of publishing within Africa, we are still struggling creating those platforms, whether it's the platforms for print on demand, whether it's platforms for sharing our resources. We are challenged, but I think there are quite a number of initiatives right now that are taking place that will make this a reality in the coming months and years as they unfold. So no straight answer on where to find your audience, but I think there are avenues, especially when we look at the digital era that we are in, there are areas that we can do that.
Thank you. I'll then give Africa a comment, and then I'll ask Bafana to say something. Do you have a question?
I don't know if I'm like confusing myself or something, but if can you please help clarify? So if a book is going to be translated from English to vernacular, does it still need to be proofread and edited? Does it? It does. Okay. I don't know if it's gonna answer.
Okay. Well, as long as you're happy. If a book is going to be translated into vernac, does it still need to be proofread? Was the question. As Africa comes forward.
Yes, my answer is a big yes, and there are several reasons for that. There are expressions in English language that will not make sense in vernacular. There are examples that might be in English that will not make sense in vernacular. And so apart from the fact that now you are translating into a different language, and the expert in that language need to ensure that everything is flowing as it was intended. So for those very basic and obvious reasons, I would say it's an absolute yes that a book translated from English to vernacular needs to be edited and proofread again.
All right. I'll hand over to Pastor Bafana to close for us.
Before we close, thank you very much for everyone. Thank you for the MIE. Sister Joan, appreciate that.